Hello, well, today I want to take a look at a poem of mine. It's a very old one, actually, probably about 40 years old, maybe more. It was written just after I'd left university and was still around the campus. Um, yeah, it's interesting because I think it's not bad, perhaps even now in terms of quality, but I've been reading a lot of Ezra Pound and T.S. Eliot, and probably the structures of the poem show that. I hope it's not some kind of very obvious or clear copy, but it's certainly uses a lot of the techniques that you find in the modernist poets. Um, yeah, it's about meeting a friend, an old friend, and going over the same ground time and time again, talking about politics and society and other things, and this person seems to always agree with whatever you say, but you feel that he would actually do the same with anybody else. He'd just agree with what anybody said, really, and there is the idea that perhaps his convictions are not really very deep. He just wants to have a drink in the pub and seem knowledgeable. However, this particular person was also someone who was active in politics, so that adds an extra kind of level of frustration to it, perhaps. So, first of all, I should just read it, so let me do that. Scene from an English public house. How much do you truly know? I speak, and you, inveterate charlatan, nod your head with great deliberation. Aesthetic sensibilities solidifying into politics, you nod and nod your head as if to say, precisely, exactly what I've always said myself. I wonder if you really know. Surely one should change one's life if some idea, latent but embedded in the brain, bursts into vigor as a stalk bursts into flower after rain. And yet you say your mind is fertilized by words. Perhaps I am insistent after all. It is not now the fashion to insist. Rather one should cleverly imply the moral stealthily within the gist. You nod your head. Exactly, you are right. And everything you say is true tonight. Well, the poem makes use of lines of varying length and occasional rhymes, not rhyming according to any pattern, but perhaps dramatically when there is need for a rhyme to emphasize a point or to change the mood or something like that. A rhyme is used, and other features are there too, which are typical of the modernists, with run-on lines and irony. It's even perhaps sardonic at times. There is a lot of anger there. I remember I felt angry at the time that whenever I met this particular person, he always seemed to agree with everything I said, but then he'd go away and start supporting issues which were the opposite of which he was the opposite of what we'd been talking about, and he'd been agreeing with me about. So there is this level of frustration here, and the person was a very good friend at the time, so there is that extra level of frustration there because I knew him really well, and I'm really asking myself if he has any convictions at all, or he just really will say whatever the person he's with wants to hear. Perhaps a writer comes across as rather dry and humorless too. Maybe I was a bit like that in those days, very sure that I was right, and I was able to make a good argument, and a lot of people perhaps found it difficult to keep up and to put the other side, but that didn't mean I was right. I was often totally wrong. I was just good at arguing my point, and I had a lot of conviction. Most people didn't really want to get involved with that, and so would just nod their head. And that's what it says he's doing here. You nod your head. Exactly, you are right, and everything you say is true tonight. The last line is full of a bitter irony. It's in parentheses, and everything you say is true tonight. In other words, it won't be true tomorrow night. He'll change and be agreeing with somebody else, probably the opposite of what he's agreeing with today. So begins with a question: how much do you truly know? He was someone who presented himself as a person of knowledge, so I'm asking the question, how much do you really know? I speak, and you inveterate charlatan. Seems I've already made my mind up about what he is. If he was a friend, or if he was a friend at this time, then I also recognize him as an inveterate charlatan. But as I say, I'm not pushing my own point of view as being right at this time. I was a very young man and full of myself and full of particular ideas and absolutely sure I was right. And the fact that this guy vacillated a lot between different positions irritated me. So nothing admirable about my own point of view, really. But I was good at argumentation, and I was very sure about my position. So I speak, and you inveterate charlatan nod your head with great deliberation. So we talked about everything: politics, society, art, aesthetic sensibilities solidifying into politics. You nod and nod your head. It seems like he's one of those dogs where you set the head bobbing up and down, and it continues for about 5 minutes, but it's meaningless. So he's agreeing, but his agreement is meaningless. As if to say, precisely, exactly what I've always said myself. This person did actually say precisely, exactly, quite a lot of the time, so I'm kind of mimicking the way he spoke. Precisely, exactly what I've always said myself. And then to myself, I wonder if you really know. Surely one should change one's life if some idea, latent but embedded in the brain, bursts into vigor, as a stalk bursts into flower after rain. So here is a carefully polished simile. As the stalk bursts into flower after rain. So this person, I'm saying, should actually change his ways if he really agrees with what I'm saying. I won't go into the politics of the time. What we believed, they're meaningless probably to both of us now. It's only the emotions and the poem that's left. And yet you say your mind is fertilized by words. And then there is a little quatrain, 4 lines, about which are deeply ironic and sarcastic and sardonic even. Perhaps I am insistent after all. It is not now the fashion to insist. Rather, one should cleverly imply the moral stealthily within the gist. So these days it's a fashion not to say anything directly, but to just imply things and suggest things and name drop and not be caught up as being representative of any particular point of view. Might still have some relevance today, I suppose, but the interest comes more from the ironic bitterness of the person speaking. And then the last 2 lines back to the person being spoken about again. You nod your head, as he did before. You nod your head, exactly, you are right. And everything you say is true tonight. So the poem is full of ironic bitterness, really. I don't think that either of us, this guy is still around, I don't think either of us would feel exactly the same way about the issues behind this poem. But I think it's not bad in terms of its structure and its dramatic construction, the way it uses irony and I, ironic bitterness and sarcasm in order to make the point. So structurally and dramatically, I think it's quite good. Although the meaning of the emotions behind it, or not the emotions themselves, the emotions can still be felt, but what was creating the emotions, what lay behind them, all that is long dead now. Let's finish by reading it one more time. Scene from an English public house. How much do you truly know? I speak, and you, inveterate charlatan, nod your head with great deliberation. Aesthetic sensibilities solidifying into politics, you nod and nod your head, as if to say, precisely, exactly what I've always said myself. I wonder if you really know. Surely one should change one's life if some idea, latent but embedded in the brain, bursts into vigour as a stalk bursts into flower after rain, and yet you say your mind is fertilized by words. Perhaps I am insistent after all. It is not now the fashion to insist. Rather, one should cleverly imply the moral stealthily within the gist. You nod your head. Exactly. You are right. And everything you say is true tonight.